My name is Holly.
And what qualifications do you have?
I am a 35-year clinical microbiologist, licensed, and as well as I've done numerous years of research in Salk. So I've basically been in charge of molecular diagnostics for a major health system in San Diego for 35 years.
Okay, and so what can you tell us? What did you do during the pandemic? Let's put it that way.
Well, I was notified right away that I was going to have to validate a PCR test for testing for COVID-19. I have done such things before many times, and the CDC sent me a test to validate to be run at our hospital. When I was validating it, I found that it only had what we call 2 primers. Primers are basically little pieces of DNA to identify an organism or a virus. Well, that simply is not enough. I complained to the CDC. I said, this can't be done. They admitted to me that one of the primers, one of the ways I was going to identify this, was actually common to every coronavirus out there. I said, so I'm using one primer to try to identify something. That's like playing a game, name that tune, and I give you one note. How can you identify a song by that? They said it does not matter because this is under emergency use only and to run the test anyway. I was shocked because this meant this test was going to throw out many false positives. I said, how do we verify that our positives are real true positives? Do I report them as possible? Do I report them as possible COVID-19 retest? They said, no, report them as strictly positive. I said, this violates every PCR protocol we've ever had in the last 25 years. And they said, it doesn't matter, it's under emergency use only. The other thing I asked, I said, I only have a biosafety lab level 2 as well as a biosafety lab level 3. I said, this virus should be under BSL 4, which is a respiratory virus. They said, it doesn't matter. Work with it on the counter. We don't care. I said, what? How? You're saying that I'm supposed to be treating tuberculosis with more care than this virus? Yeah, doesn't matter. And click, run it. Well, I got very upset when I brought the test up, and we started running hundreds and thousands of them a week. We were having sometimes up to 30% were positive, and the crossing times on these, which means we had to run them for long times before we could even detect this virus, quote unquote. And so people were being thrown into the hospital with something that was very likely not true. The other thing that went very wrong is when I would report a negative test, they would send me 5 more samples to run. And I said, well, I've already done it. And they said, doesn't matter, keep running them. I had got to up to 10 specimens per patient per day to run. And what I couldn't understand, because in normal cases, you don't run things multiple times over and over, I realized later that they were fishing for positives. So the other thing, what they were doing is they were putting people on the ventilators, and then they were opening them up, and they're doing pleural peels, opening their lungs up and scraping them out and sending it to me to do a PCR test. I said, I have never validated this test on doing it. They said, run it anyway. Most of them were negative, and then I was complaining because they were sending me Jello. And I said, is this a washing of the lung? They said, no, this is the lung itself. Well, lung is like a piece of meat. It's like a steak. And so I couldn't understand what they were doing because the lungs they were sending me was liquefied. And they said they were literally taking lung out of. So I started putting things together like something was going very wrong. I went to management and I said, what I'm doing is wrong. It's inappropriate. And there's no way to verify what I'm doing. This needs to stop. They all brought me into a room and they said, you need to do your job. And I said, my job isn't to report out erroneous results. This needs to stop. So they brought in a physician. They certified me mentally ill and marched me off the property.
How did they certify you? What did you do to be certified?
They said working with COVID has caused me too stressed and I could not do my job. And as a physician signed off that I had post-traumatic stress and I could not work in the laboratory and do my job. Even though 10 days earlier they gave me a 10% raise and said I was invaluable to their system. So in 10 days I had a mental breakdown.
So they put you on leave?
Yes. A mental leave of absence.
What was the gooey stuff? Did you ever find out what the gooey stuff was?
No.
So just talk about that a second. You said they put them on ventilators.
Yes.
The patients.
Yes.
And then they died and they opened the lungs? Or they're still
No,
alive?
these people were alive when they did this. Yes. They called them, we're pleural peals. I would sometimes get 2 or 3 a day of people on ventilators.
And they wanted you to test to see if it was
Positive for PCR for COVID-19. Yes. And that was one of my breaking points because they wanted a positive test. The test I developed was hypersensitive to be positive, but they wanted any test to be positive. I realized later they had a motivation for this that I didn't realize at the time that they had. They needed that positive test.
Just needed positive.
Yes.
Let's talk about the test itself for a second. Is there anything good about the PCR test? Does it work in any way, shape or form? Or you say it's a coronavirus, remember that word?
Yes.
So that's common cold, right?
It's a common cold.
So
if I were to swab this area, we could come up with a positive PCR because it is everywhere. And this is why there were a couple of patients I was pretty sure had something because the crossing times were like 11 and 12. That means the logarithmic curve of it came very up quickly. The ones that were coming up at 38, 48, 40, 42 cycles were probably just garbage that was out in the environment. But they were telling me. Now, if I had run this, like if you had tuberculosis, your doctor thinks you had tuberculosis, I could run a PCR on your lung. I look for 5 primers to see if I can find tuberculosis. They all have to hit for me. And the only thing I could say is possible tuberculosis to be confirmed by culturing to see if I can grow it. It's only like all PCR is a screening test. I ran PCR on people with hepatitis. Possible hepatitis. Please do antibody, please do other screenings. I send it to other labs for them to validate. None of this was done for COVID. They just wanted a positive result on something that was going to give them a positive result if they ran it enough.
Which is kind of the beginning of everything wrong with the PCR test, because many people test positive.
Absolutely.
Had a panic attack, ended up
Absolutely.
on ventilator.
In fact, I noticed when the people who came in, because they were allowing everyone, the one thing about PCR is we will not run it unless you have other symptoms. Like I've had doctors call me, I'm sure my patient has hepatitis. And I said, does he have an antibody to hepatitis? Is his liver enzymes in? We refuse to do it until they do all the preliminary testing. Then we give it to them and then we send it to another lab to confirm. So this was basically, they wanted that test and they wanted it to be positive because they got a significant amount of money if it was.
That's what a lot of this is about, isn't it?
Yes, yes. And that's what I found out, that in reality, this was, I actually, when I looked back, I saw the reasons why this happened. In 2017, I was told to make my resume out because our hospital system was going to be bankrupt within 4 years. Turns out the Medicare system was going to change the reimbursement to where the hospitals will not get enough money to basically survive. I had a close friend who worked in the CEO of the financial that, interesting, I tried for years to get new refrigerators. Everything was falling apart in a lab that I was keeping running with tongue depressors. The minute COVID hit, when I got 3 refrigerators, showed up. You need them. Here's the money. Do it. And I worked for 25 years to get those refrigerators. So I knew immediately that COVID-19 was going to save the hospital in terms of financially, yes. and they did it by killing people, unfortunately, in my opinion.
No, we've had them sitting here, loved ones told us
Yes.
about the
And I watched it because I was in the laboratory. I watched people who came in who all of a sudden got a positive PCR test. When they ran their cortisol levels, they went through the roof. These people, and when your cortisol goes up, your immune system plummets. People were literally being scared to death. And they pressured people to get on ventilators too, because that upped the money count. So I didn't realize at the time that I was in the middle of a cog of something that was out of control. Now that I'm looking back, I understand everything a lot better than at the time. But I made a big stand with the whole laboratory. There were 300 people in that lab, and I'm the only one that I refused to put a mask on, and I refused to get that vaccine, and I refused to run that test.
which made you mentally ill.
Yes, absolutely.
So
I'm certified.
Going back to PCR test again, because when the whole thing was crazy and everyone was posting stuff, there was a lot of talk about PCR tests being contaminated with potential graphene oxide. I can't even remember what it was.
The one thing I will say about at least what I watched, I do not believe that's true, because a lot of us, I didn't even have any gloves. There was nothing. There was no PPE. I was running COVID testing with my bare hands, with no masks, with no lab coats, because we didn't have any. It was all gone. So, and we were making up kits with practically Q-tips, because no company could produce them fast enough. So we were putting little saline in little things with vials with Q-tips by it to give to people to run that test. We used the flock swab a lot in into the nose for doing flu testing. It grabs epithelial cells, because PCR does not work unless you have epithelial cells, because the virus is inside the cells. So if you just sort of spit in something that doesn't have enough epithelial, I can't run the PCR. So they have these swabs, and they're nasty, I will say. We have used them for years. People hate them because and the fact is you don't need, people were telling me they were bloodying people by putting these swabs that were practically doing brain biopsies, which was inappropriate. You could just do like a little tiny bit on each one of the nares, and that's all you need to do. So I don't know what this brain biopsy thing that they were doing, which is ridiculous. We did flu, and we never did it that way. So to me, I think they wanted almost a drama with this. Unless you can really show me how they did the graphene, I don't know.
I'm just thought I'd ask you.
I will say that in my experience, none of that was happening. It was literally, but they were doing too much of the deep nasopharyngeal damage to a lot of people, which I agree.
So the tests that by the way, have never had one of these tests in my life. I don't even know what they even look like. So this is why I'm not great at this. But I do know a lot of my friends were like, "Oh, I just did a test. I'm positive. I did a test. I presume they go and buy them. I don't know how it works." Were they all the same, giving false positives as well? Because
Oh, yeah.
an awful comment. It seems you're right. That basically, if someone had a sneeze, they would get tested.
Oh, you could. I literally, in fact, we did something. When you're in a PCR department, you have to do something every quarter called a wipe test, which means I have to take a swab, run around the lab, and start swabbing it, and then run it for various PCR. If it's positive, your lab is contaminated. I did swab. Guess where you find it? On the refrigerator on the door where people grab. So guess what they're doing? Their gloves or cans are contaminated with it. They put it on the door, and then I swab it for a wipe test, and I find it. I swear I could swab this bus and I could find it. But see, what does that mean? It means it's garbage. And the thing is people say, well, it means I have COVID. And I go, well, let's take my finger off. Let's take this finger and throw it in the parking lot. And we discover this. What does this mean? It means my finger is in the parking lot. Does it mean I'm dead? Does it mean I'm alive? All you know is this finger is in the parking lot, and we have identified it to me. It doesn't, so I can pick up dead viruses that have no life, that are little parts, And then people say they have COVID. You don't know whether it's, and that's the problem which I had with the test, is that normally when I detect a virus, I can send it to another lab and they can grow it. It's living, it's growing in tissue. They know it's viable. This test, you could not prove if what I'm detecting is dead or alive. Just like if you find my thumb in the parking lot, you cannot tell if I'm dead or alive.
So the whole thing's a farce.
It's a farce. Yes. That's what got me fired. I said, the truth will set me free, and it set me free because they threw me out.
Do you have a job now?
No. I've been blackballed. I went from making $70 an hour to working part-time in a little health food store. Yeah. So I'm unemployable at this point, and they've tried to employ me. Several hospitals have offered me $1,600 a day to work for them. The first question I say, do I have to mask and do I have to get that vax? Yes and yes, bye. I will under no circumstance. You cannot buy me off with this. So, but they're desperate for someone with my experience. But unfortunately, I will call that test out because the test is invalid. You cannot validate it. And the other thing is, if you're throwing out these false positives, you need a methodology to see if that virus is actually alive and causing someone problems. That is standard procedure. And I kept saying we need to send these out to another lab that can grow them. They said, no, this is an emergency. We have no time for that.
Do these people that were saying, no, it's an emergency and said you had mental illness, were they so brainwashed that they truly believed all this? Or were they in on the darkness?
I think the upper management was in on the darkness. And the reason why I'm saying that is I really liked our original CEO. He was a great man. And 6 months before COVID hit, he said he decided to retire at 60 to be with his family. And he had been there for like 20 years. And that shocked me because he was very well respected. The people they brought in afterwards were different. So I honestly, this is my theory, I'm not saying this is true, is I think they, like chess, they planted their pieces before they went in for the real kill. And I think the hospital administrators understood this. I can only speak to mine, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes out that they were all in collusion with this.
Because some of these reports we're getting of nurses and doctors, I mean, it's just evil.
It is evil.
Or they're possessed.
I understand that they're making a lot of money. Even my doctor, my personal doctor, years ago told me that he made $80,000 bonus every year if he got 80% of his practice vaccinated. He meant it. He said, the reason you don't make me any money because I don't do any of it. So he would say, can we make a deal if you do a certain thing? I said, I don't inject myself with anything. So I would do occult bloods and some other testing. But he said, I can't make any money off of you. So these doctors were compromised in terms of they had to make a decision. Am I going to make a shitload of money or am I going to be on the side of truth? And the grand majority of them chose the latter.
Money.
It is big. I know. And for me, I cannot lie like this.
Not when we're killing people.
Not when I watched how many people. The other thing which I will say, which has never come out, 3 of our pathologists got COVID very early on. They were given hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. We were told, all of us, not to tell anyone about it. They were back in work and within a week.
Who gave them the ivermectin? The doctors? The pathologists?
Yes. So to me, they said it's because it's a experimental thing. We don't want anyone to think it could work. Well, obviously they knew it did. The other thing is I have a very close friend who was involved in Fort Detrick and did sequencing, friends with Judy Mikovich. And he did say that he found Plasmodium, which is malaria sequences in that virus. Well, it's almost like they engineered it with a kill switch in case the wrong person got it, so you have a way of treating. So I would be very shocked if they did not know how to treat this virus with ivermectin and other things, because I think it was engineered to do this. So, I mean, I know I've gone to the crazy dark side, but with everything that I've seen, if you were to talk to me, 2 or 3 years ago, I was being so gaslit, I didn't know what the heck was going on. And when they walked me off the property, I didn't know whether I was doing the right thing or not. I had so many people, tell me that, they needed to have all this stuff done and all this COVID analysis needs to be, and I was looking at it, it was all a lie. And no one could hear me. So I spent a whole year trying to get people to stop from not take that shot. I did everything I could. I have had people, literally will never talk to me ever again. I had people call me up screaming because you're going to convince my brother not to take a shot and he's going to die and his death is on you. I had a lot of crazy stuff happen to me. But when this happens, you really kind of think, am I doing the right thing? Because everyone is so hell-bent to jump off a cliff and I'm trying to stop them. So now I look back, I feel more vindicated, but I couldn't stop the lab from doing what it did. Who knows how many hundreds of thousands of people were affected by what was coming out of that lab. I don't know. I did my best.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to say?
I just pray that there is some justice that will come out of all this, and that those who were partaking in this, to me it's beyond fraud. It's in a different realm of spiritual evil, and that those people who were involved with this need to have something. They need to either have their medical license stripped or something for participating in something that was obviously not right. And I hope to see before I die that there is some justice done for all of this. And I just want to say sorry to the world that I couldn't help as many as I tried to do.
No, we really appreciate you being here. Thank you.